Welcome. This is the video for part 1 of topic 1, which is dealing with solving equations. So when we solve equations, we begin with something like this. Okay. And then we want to solve for x. So we need to get rid of anything else on that side. Okay, so we need to get the 9 to the other side, and to do that, we're going to do the opposite. We're going to use the inverse operation, which will undo the plus. So the inverse of plus will be minus. But we need to do this to both sides so that it will stay balanced. The reason for that is because of the subtraction property of equality, just meaning that we're keeping it balanced. We're keeping it equal on both sides. What I do to one side, I have to do to the other. Now, these 9s cancel out, which is what we're looking for, leaving us with x equals 12 minus 9, which is 3. Okay. Now, we could check this because now the 3 goes in place of the x, so 3 plus 9 equals 12. Well, I know 3 plus 9 is 12, so that is correct. All right. Now, sometimes we might have something like this. X minus 5 equals 7. Again, I am solving for x. I want to get the 5 to the other side. To do that, I need to do the opposite, or the inverse of subtraction, which is addition. Because when I do that, I can see those are going to cancel each other out. Now, by the properties of equality, I must do whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other. So I've just used the addition property of equality. Okay. When I do that, I'm left with x equals 7 plus 5, which is 12. Again, we can now plug the 12 in for the x, so 12 minus 5 equals 7, and 12 minus 5 is 7, so that is correct. So we are undoing, we are using the inverse. The next problem we're going to look at is negative 3x equals 15. I want to solve for my x, which means I have to get that negative 3 on the other side. Now, right here, this is a coefficient and a variable. Whenever you have a coefficient and a variable together, to pull them apart, we need to do the opposite. So right now, this is actually being multiplied. So the opposite would be to divide. So we're going to divide both sides by the negative 3. Okay, and you have to take the whole coefficient. Don't leave any of it behind. Okay, so we're taking the whole thing. Okay. Now, negative 3 divided by negative 3, we don't want 0 like we did with adding and subtracting. Instead, we want that to just go to 1 because 3 divided by 3 is 1, negative divided by negative is positive. So we're left with 1x, or just x. 15 divided by 3 is 5, but again, whenever you divide by a negative, it brings you down, it lowers you down, it pulls down, making you negative again. We could again check this. Oh, before we do, this was the division property of equality because we did it to both sides. We can check our work by negative 3, and I'm going to plug in my x, so the negative 5 is what I found, equals 15. Negative times negative is positive, 3 times 5 is 15. And that is true. Alrighty. The next one we're going to look at is this. X over 5 equals negative 2. And many students don't really like this, but think about this, okay? This is really saying x divided by 5, right? So that means the opposite of division would be multiplication, all right? Now, the better way to write this is I'm going to multiply this by 5. Now, if there was a negative, I'd probably put a parenthesis around it. Because this is a fraction, you could put a 1 under it if you'd like. But see how those 5s are now canceling out? 5 divided by 5 is 1. So we're left with just x. X over 1, but that's really just x. Whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other side. So 2 times 5 is 10. Anytime you multiply or divide by a negative, it's going to pull you back down to the negative. Okay? This is known as the multiplication property of equality. Again, we could plug it back in. So negative 10 divided by 5, does that equal negative 2? And yes, 10 divided by 5 is 2, still negative, and that is true. Okay. Now, from there, we are going to solve two-step equations, but these are the basis of every single problem that we work. Okay, let me show you one more one-step using some fractions because these can sometimes cause problems. Okay, so we're going to look at negative 2/3 x equals negative 6. Okay, well, I know I need to get x alone. I know I have to get the negative 2/3 to the other side. Okay, I know that this is a coefficient and a variable, which means these are being multiplied. So to undo multiplication, I would divide by negative 2/3. Okay, now let's think about this for a minute. So negative 2/3 divided by negative 2/3, okay? Remember, whenever we're dividing fractions, we are doing keep, change, and flip. We're finding the reciprocal. Well, then I can see those are canceling out, right? And leaving me with 1. All right, so those are canceling each other out, and I'm left with x equals. Now, what I really did here was I multiplied by the reciprocal, okay? So another way to have written this, instead of dividing it, I could have said I am multiplying by the reciprocal. Again, whatever I do to one side, I'm going to do to the other. So I'm going to go ahead over here and multiply by the reciprocal. I'm going to put a 1 under it to make it a little bit easier. Now, negative negative is positive. 6 times 3 is 18, and 1 times 2 is 2. You might have seen that there is a trick there, okay, which is the way I like to refer to it. It just means that we are actually reducing this by 2 before we multiply to make easier numbers. 2 divided by 2 is 1. 6 divided by 2 is 3. 3 times 3 is 9, which is also what 18 divided by 2 is. Okay, so this is solving equations with one step. There will be another video with two-step following.